Today, we're going to talk about a battle that didn't just win a war, it literally forged an empire. This was the showdown that would set the course for Western civilization, and it all came down to one single brutal fight. Let's dive into the Battle of Zama.
That's really the big question, isn't it? The Battle of Zama wasn't just some clash of armies. This was a throwdown between two global superpowers, Rome and Carthage, fighting for control of, well, everything. So how did it all come down to this one day?
So first, let's set the stage, a world at war. Because to really get why Zama was so important, you have to understand the sheer scale of the conflict it brought to an end. This wasn't some random skirmish, this was the bloody climax of a 17-year slugfest known as the Second Punic War. Yeah, 202 BCE, in what's now Tunisia. This was it, the final winner-take-all brawl. For more than a decade, the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal had been running rampant in Italy. But this final battle, it was going to be fought in his own backyard. And that's exactly why we're still talking about it thousands of years later. Zama is the ultimate story of strategy, guts, and consequence. It's one of those rare moments where you can literally see the course of history pivot on the genius or the mistakes of two commanders. Which brings us to our next part, Clash of the Titans. Because forget the empires and the armies for a second, this story at its heart boils down to two men, two of the greatest military minds the ancient world had ever seen. On one side, you've got Hannibal Barca, the legend, the man who was the boogeyman for an entire generation of Romans. And on the other side, Publius Cornelius Scipio, who would later be known as Scipio Africanus. He was the challenger. And what makes this so incredible is that Scipio had spent years studying Hannibal, learning his tricks, just waiting for the chance to use them against him.
So you gotta ask, how did they even get here? Well, Scipio made an incredibly gutsy move. Instead of trying to fight Hannibal in Italy, where he was basically undefeated, he said, "Fine, I'll take the war to you." He invaded North Africa, directly threatening Carthage itself. And that forced Carthage's hand. They had to call their best general home to defend the city, setting the stage for one last epic confrontation.
So the battle begins. And right away, Hannibal unleashes his secret weapon, the one thing he hoped would just shatter the Roman lines before the real fighting even started. Just try to imagine seeing this. 80 war elephants, basically living tanks, charging right at you. This was classic Carthaginian shock and awe. The goal? Pure terror and chaos. But here's the thing. Scipio was ready for it. And this right here is just pure genius. See, instead of forming a solid wall of men, Scipio arranged his soldiers in columns, leaving these big, wide lanes between them. So as the elephants came charging in, the Romans blew their horns and screamed, spooking the animals. And the panicked elephants did exactly what Scipio hoped they'd do. They just charged harmlessly down the empty lanes and out the back. Or, even better, they turned around and trampled Hannibal's own men. And just like that, Hannibal's big opening move was a complete disaster. His greatest weapon had not only been neutralized, it had actually backfired, causing confusion in his own ranks and handing all the momentum over to Rome. Okay, so with the elephant problem solved, the battle now becomes a more traditional fight. Infantry against infantry, cavalry against cavalry. And this is where Rome's key advantages really started to count. Now, Hannibal's infantry was a mix of his battle-hardened veterans and some new, less reliable recruits. But the real game-changer was on the wings. In a brilliant diplomatic move before the battle, Scipio had convinced the Numidians, the absolute best horsemen in North Africa, to switch sides. And get this, they used to fight for Hannibal. This one move gave Rome a massive advantage in cavalry. So here's how the rest of the battle went down. Scipio's disciplined infantry marches forward, locking Hannibal's troops in a brutal fight. While that's happening, the superior Roman and Numidian cavalry on the flanks completely crushes the Carthaginian horsemen. And then, and this is the key part, they don't just ride off. They regroup, wheel around, and slam right into the back of Hannibal's infantry line. It was a classic pincer movement, the exact kind of brilliant tactic that Hannibal himself had used to destroy Roman armies in the past. Now the master tactician was getting a taste of his own medicine, attacked from the front and the back. His army, even his tough-as-nails veterans, was trapped, surrounded, and completely destroyed. The fighting was over. Hannibal, the invincible general, had finally been defeated in a major battle.
But the shockwaves from Zama were just beginning to spread. This was about way more than just one victory. This victory didn't just end the war, it ended an era. Carthage, Rome's great rival for centuries, was broken. From this point on, Rome stood alone as the undisputed master of the Western Mediterranean. The path was now wide open for an empire.
And you can see just how fast the dominoes fell after that. A year later, Carthage sued for peace on humiliating terms. Hannibal himself lived out his days in exile, constantly hunted by the Romans. And while the city of Carthage limped on for another 50 years, it was never a threat again, until Rome finally just wiped it off the map for good. Zama had sealed its fate. I mean, this chart says it all, right? Before Zama, the Mediterranean was a two-horse race. It could have gone either way. After Zama, there was only Rome. The Republic had faced its greatest existential threat, survived, learned from its enemy, and came out stronger than ever. It was now ready to build an empire that would define the next 1,000 years of history. Which leaves us with one last, really interesting question to chew on. Hannibal was the legend, the tactical genius who terrified Rome for years. But Scipio was the one who studied his enemy, adapted, and ultimately won the war that mattered most. So it makes you wonder, in the end, who was truly the greater general?